the point of creating a new life?
Well, I'm a Muslim.
Yeah.
So for me, we see it as a form of worship to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we're commanded to procreate as number one.
Killing plants to have your dinner or something like that. Yeah. So why it's kind of double standard when we are taking meat as my food.
Yeah.
It's a problem to I'm killing the animal. So
And plants. So because the animals that you eat have to eat plants and they have to eat way more plants. So a plant-based diet minimizes that suffering. So our existence, in general, is going to cause harm. It's just the nature of us on this planet. It's just that is a sad reality. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to minimize that as much as possible. So eating a plant-based diet reduces that, and when we eat animal products, it's almost like maximizes that. So the suffering I'm trying to cause is as little as possible.
Because this touches on. So would you describe yourself as a utilitarian?
Yeah.
So how are you quantifying the amount of pain that's being experienced before or after certain things are being put in place? So like, for example, if you say you're trying to reduce the amount of suffering, how are you sure that you have? Like, for example, would you say a smaller life contains more suffering or a larger life contains more suffering?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know,
But we'll start with first, though. Would you say that your basis is utilitarianism?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you word it this way? Would you say that what is good is that which increases pleasure for the most amount of beings, and what is evil is that which decreases pleasure or causes pain for the most amount of beings? Yeah. So how are you weighing it?
Well, I mean, you know, like, say with with the animal agriculture, we can see the impact and the amount of damage that has on say a variety of different levels.
Yeah.
We can see it on say like an environmental level, like cows. All these animals, they need to be fed crops and they need to have space and land to live. So we're like decimating like the Amazon rainforest.
So, but the issue here is that, like, let's say you, because like I wouldn't even say I'm against. I'm not against things like factory farming. I can see why you might have problems with things like them. But for me, the biggest issue is that when we're talking about these things, it's often just sort of given as or taken for granted that you are reducing suffering. But there's no effort into explaining how you're quantifying that at all. Because my biggest issue is that pleasure and pain isn't quantifiable. You can't really tell me whether or not you have reduced it. No. And like, for example, and I know it's a trope that gets brought up often, but there are things that suffer because of agriculture as well. Like, how are you sure that, like, for example, if we just stop putting animals through slaughterhouses, they don't disappear for one. So we've got to put them somewhere, so we have to give them space. They've still got to live, and maybe they'd be wild, or they'd not be wild, or... Clever idea.
For us or for you? It's selfish.
So what would happen with the current stock, livestock?
Yeah.
What would we do?
I mean, it's about the concept. Like, we're not going to say create like a vegan world instantly. It'll probably be a gradual process. So the amount of animals that are in existence right now is in relation to the demands that humans have. Yeah. So if humans stop buying these products, the amount of animals that are bred into existence into these controlled environments will just gradually decrease.
But would their levels not change independently of human control anyway? Because, like, for example, if you look in the wild, you do have fluctuations in animal population depending on the degrees to which there may be predators present.
Yeah.
So they did that experiment. I don't know if you want to call it an experiment, but they started introducing predators into Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And so there was this huge issue where there was like massive overpopulation of like deers and other grazing animals, and this had a huge impact on the environment in terms of even the rivers and things were affected by it. So when they introduced the predators, they saw all these mad changes start to occur. So yeah, maybe you would like reduce the amount of sort of like forced insemination. I have no problem like with ideas like that at all, but I don't see how it follows from that you would necessarily lead to a world where there is less suffering in a way that you could quantify.
Well, I'm saying in the sense of like just for animal agriculture, like all those animals are domesticated animals that are like a human invention basically. They're like, they're selectively bred now, and they're almost like they're created like a new sort of species, like the chickens that we eat. They grow up so fast that their legs can't even support them. You see them in the factory farms, like by the time just before they go into slaughter, they're like basically just they can't even walk around. So, all those animals that are in this system right now, I believe they are suffering.
Should we kill them all?
I don't think we should. It's not
because the way you explained it then made it sound like their very existence is itself suffering. So if you're a utilitarian, wouldn't it be more just to slaughter them all?
I mean, they're bred into existence just to be slaughtered anyway. My argument would be we stop breeding them into existence. The ones that are in existence right now, I don't know. We do our best to reduce because we created them. Therefore, they're our problem. We do what we can. There's no easy. I'm not saying everything's.
No, I get that. I get
that. It's a grey area.
But what I'm just trying to get you to see is that. Like you've admitted at least that these things have been bred to a degree where their life is a painful one. So wouldn't it be more just to end that life? Because if you are trying your hardest to keep them going for longer, you are essentially prolonging their suffering.
Potentially, I know.
But then in this case,
that's a hard.
But that would be then a vegan argument for the slaughter of animals, which seems a bit.
Well, no, but I'm not advocating that though. I'm recognising that they are.
I know you're not going to. But the point is that if you say that your basis for morality is utilitarianism, if you can say that it follows necessarily that life is suffering.
Yes. I think it's unethical to create life.
Okay, but then that leads to antinatalism.
Yeah, I'm an antinatalist.
So if there was a way to nuke the world, and in a way that you could guarantee that nothing would suffer, but all life was to end, you would have no more suffering. That's an antinatalist argument.
No, well, that might be some antinatalist.
But it follows from utilitarian.
It wouldn't be my antinatalist argument. My antinatalist.
I know. I'm not saying you necessarily are making this argument. I'm saying that, for me, as far as I can see, if you want to hold utilitarianism as the base of your morality, that if that's all good and evil is, if it's just pleasure and pain is necessarily unescapable, and that life necessitates pain, and if you're going to say that you're against creating new life, and if there is a possibility or an option to end all life without there being suffering at all, then wouldn't it be just? If not, why not, according to your own moral system?
I don't know. I just think in a different sort of perspective. My perspective would be, those in existence value their existence. We have a desire to maintain our existence as long as possible, and we try to live that life.
But that's completely unrelated to.
My argument is basically just to stop creating new life. It's not like there's all these beings that's not in existence. They're not just sat in limbo, just going, I really want to exist. Like I'm desperate to come into existence. They're not missing out on anything. So the argument would be like, there's no need to create a life that will guarantee to suffer, that will suffer.
See, but this is the thing, if I don't see, what you said there was that we want to survive,
Once we're in existence. Once we're in existence,
But that want to exist would, from a utilitarian perspective, if existence necessitates suffering, that desire would be an evil desire. Because that desire then would be the desire for suffering. Because life is suffering.
We had that's like
do you concede to the proposition that to live is to suffer?
I mean, all life will contain suffering. Okay. All life contains suffering.
So life contains suffering. So to live is to suffer. To desire to live, therefore, would be to desire suffering. But you're saying that suffering is itself evil.
No, you're saying that. I'm not saying that.
No, you're the utilitarian.
My main focus is basically, I think it's quite simple in the sense of just, there's no good argument to create life that doesn't exist.
No, I don't know. I would say,
Like, what's the point of creating a new life?
well, I'm a Muslim,
Yeah.
so for me, we see it as a form of worship to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we're commanded to procreate, as number one. Life is itself not just suffering,
Of course it's not. No.
but it is filled with beauties and pleasure. We're commanded to worship, and like for example, for me, if I bring children into the world and they do good in the world, I benefit from that as if they're doing it for me, for example. So if I pass away, they can make prayers for me and things like that, and this can all benefit me in the afterlife. They can, if I raise them right, they can be people who speak out for justice and against oppression in the world.
Yeah.
So for me, there's lots of good reasons, because evil's not going away. And so I need to make an active contribution towards at least trying to make the world a better place in one way I can. And one way of doing that is by having and raising good children.
I would say that there's numerous children in existence in this moment in time that aren't in loving families, that have been abandoned.
Yeah.
I would personally say we should focus.
Can I do that as well?
We should focus on those in existence, look after them, nurture them, raise them to be as good of people as you can, give them a loving family.
Can I do that as well?
Rather than bring in these new ones that have no desire to come into existence in the first place. They're not existing, they're not missing out on anything, because there's no consciousness from them.
I'm pretty glad my mum brought me into existence.
Yeah, because that's the way our brains are hardwired. Like, it's like an evolutionary trait. Like, the reason, like, most everyone sees the positivities in the world, and I do. Like, I'm not suffering. Like,
so why would you want to prevent someone from experiencing that?
I would, because they're not missing out on anything.
They are.
But, no, they're not, because they don't exist.
No, but if they did, then they would experience.
If they did exist, but like they don't need to be created. And once you create someone, you've created someone who's guaranteed to suffer when that suffering didn't need to happen in the first place. We make those decisions, don't we? Like,
but then how is this not just leading towards antinatalism, which is the initial argument?
Yeah.
So where we force sterilise everyone.
Well, I'm facing some problem to understand him here. Are you saying that to decreasing the suffer, we should stop taking children as well?
I'm saying we should stop creating life.
But how far would you go to that?
That's it. That's as far as I would go. I'm not.
Including children.
Any being, any sentient life.
Yeah, but when you say that's as far as you would go, what does that necessitate? Does that necessitate forced sterilisation?
I wouldn't force anything on anyone.
And you said we should
then
take
how are
care
you ever going to get
to education. We talk to these people, we have these discussions, and then people can make their own decisions. Like, people that create children, I don't go, you're unethical. No. That's your decision. And I'm like, that's fine.
You don't have to say it, but it is. It is inferred from your position, which is fine. I'm not someone who gets offended by that. No. But you are saying that this is good and this is evil. What I'm doing, by necessity, according to your moral outlook, would be an evil. And so what I am doing is, as far as you would be concerned, evil.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't use the word evil. I do not think you're evil. I don't know you, but I do not think you're evil.
But if I'm telling you I'm having children and I want more children and I want enough to have my own little football team.
So I would say these discussions, hopefully maybe, it's this idea of planting seeds in people's heads. Like, maybe some people don't really haven't thought about these sort of concepts. Yeah. The majority of people on this planet are probably here by accident. Most people actually don't really. Obviously, a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't really think about having children. It's just
that's
we procreate, and then it just happens, and like I was saying earlier, it's an evolutionary trait that we have. I don't. If I was to have children, I would adopt a child.
Don't talk about people who bring children to this world and they say they just happen. They are mistakes.
I'm saying sometimes it happens.
My children, these are my daughter. I love them. I wanted them before they were born.
Yeah.
So I won't let anybody tell me that they were a mistake. They just happened.
I'm sorry, I did not.
Most people in this world, most people, you're the odd one out, maybe, or few other.
No, because I think
most
the point
of
is
people, they do it because they want children, because they want to love them, because they want to share life with them. That's normal.
I think this is probably the more common view in the world as well,
Okay.
because we live in a secular Western country where there is this popularity towards notions of liberalism and like exceptional cases of freedom, and having a marriage and having children is seen as a reduction of your liberties because you have increased levels of duty. When you have children, you don't get to do whatever the hell you want whenever you want.
No.
And so I think that's tied to the reason why people aren't wanting to have children anymore, and obviously with the increase of things like
climate,
Well, it's their choice.
So
Don't
if I,
have them.
if
you
people
think
won't
they're
follow
not-
his instructions, so what will happen after 100 years in this world? It will be empty, right? There will be no human.
and what's ironic as well is we also suffer from loneliness.
Yeah.
And in your world it would get increasingly more lonely.
The end part. I mean, human existence will end eventually. There's all species go extinct. Humans have only been around for a very limited of time, and we're probably arguably the only species that destroys their own environment. Like the way we're currently living is literally, like the 40-degree heat wave that's just come about isn't some just random freak event. It's happening because of increase in like greenhouse gas emissions. Like our fossil fuel addicted polluting society is decimating the world. Like as this planet gets hotter and hotter, our ocean levels will rise. There's billions of people that live in coastal towns where they currently live will be underwater, so they have to move. Like 1 billion people don't move peacefully. There'll be war, chaos. There will be a lot of pain and suffering. They're saying Africa, majority of Africa, or large parts of Africa, in about 10 years' time, will be uninhabitable. There's like 700 million people that are going to move. One other thing. There's this thing called the wet bulb temperature. A lot of people probably haven't heard about it. It's this point in time where the temperature's at a certain point, so 40 degrees or so, and the humidity is at a certain level as well, and our bodies can no longer produce sweat. If we're outside in those sort of temperatures where we can't sweat basically cools our body down. Instead, our organs just heat up. Within about an hour or 2 or 3 hours, we just die because our organs were just shut down. In India and Pakistan, throughout this summer, they've been hitting close to 50 degrees Celsius. And our media is not reporting on it because our media profits from this fossil fuel world.
Yeah, I have no disagreements with any of these, but this sort of moves on a little bit from the initial discussion, which was, how is it that we are to say that eating animals is necessarily an evil?
Because it causes harm to someone else when it's completely unnecessary.
So why is it that harm is evil?
For me, it's just a case of empathy. If I wouldn't want that done to me, I don't think I should be doing that to someone else.
Okay, so your principle is linked somewhat to the act to others as you would have act upon yourself. There's an issue with that as an ethos, because there are weird people in the world, and if they take on your ethos, like for example in America, you have some people that like a challenge, and so they like if someone was to try to come onto their land, because then they get an opportunity to fight, to shoot, to do whatever. Now if they adopt that as a principle, then they should be justified in breaking into someone else's house and trying to
but that's why we that's why we try to create a law and order. And
but then you're using something else to create the law, because what we're doing here, we're trying to get to the bottom of what is it that makes something right and wrong. And so you highlighted a number of things. So you said that you're to some degree, I guess, a utilitarian, and then you added or coupled that with the do unto others as you would have to done to yourself. But with the whole utilitarianism thing, you can't quantify pleasure and pain, so you can't guarantee. And then as well, how far into the future do we draw the line, and how well are our plans and our calculations really going to come into an effect in the way we think they will? And what if, when we do something, it gives rise to greater levels of suffering because we've not planned it out properly, or because the way we figured it turns out to be incorrect? So there's all these issues. But when you talk about it, you do say it as if we just all became vegan, that somehow all the suffering.
No, I didn't say that. I don't
would
believe
decrease.
That. It's one stage inner. I'm saying all the animals that we eat in the animal agriculture industry exist exists because of us, exists because we like burgers, milkshakes, all these things that aren't necessary. That is a lot of suffering going on, and that is an element of our society that we could end. It doesn't need to exist, so therefore that level of suffering would go away if we
but you're also assuming that it wouldn't be replaced with other forms of suffering. So the land that was otherwise used as pasturing for cattle is going to be used for other means where other life can move in and increase in population, and therefore you're going to have increased levels of suffering within. Like if you imagine like when you go through the countryside here, the fields are generally just grass. Now and that's because obviously things are just pasturing on there. Now if they stop being used for cattle, it doesn't mean life stops using that land. New life moves in.
I know.
And there's a constant cycle of suffering. So you can't be sure at all that stopping that has reduced the net level of suffering on the planet.
But there's other things that we can do with that land, though.
Yeah, of course. But other animals will utilise that as well. Maybe forests grow.
Well, say hypothetically that land actually you just have it as a tarmac or something. There's nothing. Just...
I'm
not saying to do that. But
exactly. So what do we do with it?
Well, I don't know.
There's a few options. We do what you said with tarmac.
Between land that's utilised by man and land that's actually given to nature.
But if the issue here is about whether the levels of suffering, and you're doing this in order to reduce suffering, but then you introduce a new environment where new life can move in, procreate, there is going to be a predator and prey cycle that is introduced to these new environments. And you haven't guaranteed a reduction in suffering at all because the wild is filled with it.
We aren't God. We don't get to make those decisions. What existed before, before the age of the Anthropocene, was just a natural state of nature.
Are we not in that? Are you an atheist?
I'm an atheist. Yeah.
Say again?
I'm an atheist. Yeah.
So are we not in that cycle? Why are you looking at it like we're distinct from the natural cycle? Would you make this complaint against ants, the way they change their environment? Would you make this complaint about any other animal?
It's because of the advances that we've made in technology and the way that we've been able to supersede all other. We've become the dominant species that has completely changed the face of the world.
All right.
And no other species has come anywhere near doing what we've done.
Okay.
And so
So why does that necessitate making a special rule for humanity?
Well, it depends if you want a plan of abundant and varied wildlife. If you're happy to go into a future where there is where it's dominated by one species and there's no diversity, then fine. But
just to be clear, by the way,
to be valued and to be prioritized, then we need.
I have no problem with half of the things that you're suggesting.
No.
So, but I'm not of the opinion. So I'm of the opinion that factory farming is problematic, and the way, even from a halal perspective, there's very specific rulings with how we slaughter animals. You're supposed to reduce their suffering to the most possible ability, the most degree of your own ability. You're going to make sure that the other animals can't see it,
and he doesn't see the
knife.
Yeah, the blood.
You calm him. He doesn't see the blood, and then you're supposed to make sure that you cut the jugular, so that there's no oxygen going to his brain, and he faints within seconds. So the whole process is set out so that the whole process is set out to reduce the amount of suffering that they experience in that slaughtering process. So, go on.
So we use this term humane slaughter. So
I would just say halal slaughter. I wouldn't say human.
Yeah, no, but
I'm saying is.
I know, but you're trying to describe a method. It's like how I said, I do unto others as you do unto yourself.
I'm not using that principle.
No,
because I don't believe humans can be eaten.
But would you accept that for yourself? Would you?
No.
You wouldn't want to leave this world in that manner. And there's no actual necessary reason to be killing the animal because we don't need to eat animals to live.
Right. So I would say it's not just about living; it's about living well. Now, meat, as far as I'm aware, is the most nutrient-dense form of it. So, an argument maybe a vegan might use, and I don't know if you use this argument or not, is that where do animals get their protein from? But the thing is animals don't if we're looking at a cow, what does a cow do? A cow literally just walks around, eats, poops, and sleeps. And their whole day is spent just eating that, and they have multiple stomachs in order to be able to like break all of that down. And that's their life. Their life is literally just that.
Yeah.
And I used to be vegetarian, and the amount of food that I used to have to eat, and not only that, I think it did impact my mental well-being as well.
Right.
And so I suffered under like that.
Yeah.
So if suffering is bad,
I would say
the question is whose suffering is it that we're prioritizing?
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, so I'm not a utilitarian, so I'm a Muslim, and what I say is good and evil is dependent upon the Quran and the Sunnah, the revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal, and from the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the reason I believe in that is another story that's beyond the scope of this discussion, but I believe I have good reasons to believe that there is a God. I have good reasons to believe that Allah Azza wa Jal exists. I have good reasons to believe that the Quran is the word of God.
Yeah.
And so I have good reasons to believe that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a messenger. And so because I have good reasons to believe these propositions, I have good reasons to follow the moral injunctions that he commands upon us.
Yeah.
And one of them is that eating meat is permissible under certain
But is it like, do you have to? You've got the option basically. Your God isn't saying you have to. You've just basically got the option to.
Yeah.
So if you have the
Ask
option,
you this, don't you think if we're gonna be eating vegetables, animals gonna be eating vegetables, we're gonna be competing with them. So we're gonna, because we have more power, we will get the vegetarians before them, and we're gonna drive them dead.
But this is the compete. So it's your argument that that meat eaters would be stronger than vegetarians?
No, what I'm saying is, I mean, if we don't want the animal to suffer, and we're gonna be eating vegetables, whole vegetarians, we're still gonna compete with them, and they will be suffering because of hunger, because we have, like what you just said, we are more powerful, and we can control, the universe, right? And so we are better competitors than them.
So,
this guy.
I just found he's my friend, okay, so don't get me wrong. But I found it interesting how he presented to you on what foundations he bases his belief that it's okay to eat animals. Okay, so he bases it that if it would be morally wrong to kill animals for food, then God would not make.
He wouldn't allow it.
Even our religion, yes, we're not forced to eat animals, but in certain occasions we're ordered to slaughter the animals.
Yeah, like Hajj.
Like in Hajj when we do the pilgrim, and on the Eid when we celebrate and we give the meat to the poor people and stuff. But not even looking to that, what my question would be to you, because I don't know, I haven't followed the conversation. I don't know if it happened before, but what are you basing your foundation on? What foundation are you basing it to? It's morally wrong to eat the animal.
Empathy.
But then I have empathy for the deer when the lion eats it.
Yeah.
So should I?
So do I.
Yeah, but I also have empathy for the lion.
I wouldn't want to be eaten alive.
Yeah.
And a lion has no choice.
What about a bear? What about other omnivores?
Let me ask you then, if you have...
One sec, brother. Answer one question at a time.
So I do this one, a lion in the wild, basically, they're in a situation where they have to eat another animal to survive. Their bodies, a carnivore, can't live off plants alone.
Because this ties into what you mentioned before. So we've got this technological advancement. Now, if we have the ability, because there's not that many lions out there, if we have the ability to create environments where we can give them alternatives, would that be compulsory upon us? Where it would prevent deers being eaten?
Yeah, I mean,
where you give them other food?
I wouldn't like to use the word compulsory. I would like to live in a world where we're striving just to reduce the amount of suffering as possible, and what we do doesn't then have a knock-on impact, which then could potentially cause more suffering down the road. Like it's a very delicate system that we live in, and it's a very it's complex. So I'm not saying there's I'm not coming up here saying this is the only
I know you're not. I don't at any point
and-
want to make it sound like I am saying it. Well, so my background is philosophy, and what I'm just focusing on is necessary inferences from particular propositions, and you're putting forward certain propositions, and I see that if you were to commit to these, that it would lead to certain things maybe having to be made.
Yeah,
or
these are why
considered.
we have these, these deep discussions potentially, don't we? And we don't make rash decisions, and we don't live in a world where we force things upon people. We live in a democracy where we can share these sort of. I didn't go to university. Like, I'm from a working class family.
I am as well.
I played poker for a living until like about 4 years ago. I watched this documentary that talks about the environmental impact of animal agriculture. Cowspiracy to anyone out there.
I've seen it.
It.
I think that was the one that made me become vegetarian. When I did.
And now I try to have these civil conversations with people where we basically I can appreciate.
I have a question.
I can appreciate your point of view. Sorry.
So I'm a student of medical science. So as far I go to the lab and all research, we use animal to test vaccine or this kind of stuff. Yeah. So you are really concerned about the suffering of the animals, human, and all other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to minimizing the suffering of the human, we are using the animal to test different kind of medicine.
Yeah.
So if I use the animal to reduce the suffering of the human, is it right or wrong?
I think in this day and age, with the technology that we have, it's wrong because we have other methods of developing new, say, vaccines, new medical procedures, new cures without testing on animals. We don't need to test on animals. There's other models that we can use.
Maximum of the medicine needs. Maximum of the medicine needs to test.
No, we don't. I'm almost guaranteed. I would happily bet all the money that I have in the bank that we don't need to test on animals to create new.
Yeah, but then it would be tested. It would technically be tested on the first humans you give it to, because you're not going to know.
But he could sign up consciously, couldn't they? They could sign up.
Not necessarily, because
you are going to taking the suffering for the human.
No, but I'm saying we can create these medicines that reduce suffering without needing to test on animals. I'm saying we don't need to do that anymore.
But your premise there is that if it was to be, basically, it would transition from animal testing to human testing, and that these would be conscious contributors. Now, the thing is like, if you said yourself, you come from a working background. I do. I come from a council estate in North Manchester, and there is a lot of people that come from these areas that need money, and so what you would probably find, you're not going to find Bill Gates signing up to become tested on these medications.
No.
You're going to be finding people from working class backgrounds or that are suffering from poverty that see this as a potential way of earning some sort of capital and then suffering as a result of this as well.
That's a potential hypothetical, and I wouldn't want that
I
to be
wouldn't even say it's
happening.
potential. If you were to transition from animal testing to human testing, that's pretty much
This,
guaranteed.
this is an area that I'm not going to be able to give, because it's not something that I study.
That's fair.
I am basically aware of other people that do campaigning against vivisection and animal testing, and from my understanding of it is that the medicine, these are professional, the experts, a lot of experts in their field say we can make these breakthroughs now without being able to do
There's
it.
even a question as to whether or not it's halal.
But then
about
also
animal testing, because you're not even allowed to fish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you can't fish for fun in Islam.
But you touched upon a good point in the sense of, we live in a society where a lot of people are suffering at this moment in time because of limited, means. And that's another thing that, we really, really do need to address. Like, to have extreme wealth, like Bill Gates, like Jeff Bezos, like Elon Musk, there has to be extreme poverty. And there's this such huge imbalance that we've allowed, this greed to spiral out of control. There needs to be I believe, inequality,
I think Islam would be a solution to this, because it's interesting. There's an article, you search it after, who's the most charitable.
Right.
And they were looking at from the biggest sort of charity websites, and the people that were at the bottom of that were atheists. They gave on average something like £100 a year. And then it was the Christians and the Jews, I can't remember which order they were. And then right at the top was Islam, with Muslims who were giving a lot. And it's mainly because the Quran is something that emphasizes this heavily. Help the needy, help the poor, help the hungry. And there's lots of opportunity where we love to give money, but not just give money, but give money to the point where it hurts us. Because we feel the more it hurts, the more beneficial it is. And so, funnily enough, I think
That's
if
lovely.
you want to help with
That's
that,
lovely.
become
That's
Muslim.
lovely.
I had a question based on something that was said a while ago, and it was how the justification for like the way that you live, that and it comes from the the Quran and like your religious text.
Yeah, from the Creator.
Do you think that there's something to be said for like taking the difference in the world into account? So, for example, when that text was written, when was it produced?
1400 years ago.
And like it was the state of the world is very, very different then. There's a lot less of us, and so I'm thinking of things like the constitutional right to bear arms or something. That when that was enshrined in the Constitution, arms were very different things to what they are now, and so. When we're talking about like how many children we have and like how much if we meet, for example, it makes a very real difference. The fact that there's 7 billion people on the planet now than there were 1400 years ago when that text was produced.
There's less than 1 billion, like then.
So now, like, if everyone has 10 children. That's a real problem. Whereas before we
this is the thing,
know
everyone
that there's a planet of finite resources. We know that for a fact. We can see our effect on the planet greatly. It's quite, and so like, should we revise? I'm not saying because especially when something gives you freedom to do something. It doesn't say you must.
So you can make.
You must have many children. You go, well, maybe now I can, and I know I have that ability. Should I maybe then just work to a slightly lesser thing? I'll maybe just replace myself and the person that I'm creating children with. Maybe we just try and plateau so we only have, obviously.
So the thing is the way I see it, when we're looking at what sort of, because we say, we take from the Quran and then we take from the Sunnah, and we have higher birth rates generally than you would do from atheists. Now, one of the issues is we will end up out-competing you guys because we're having children and we're passing our message on to them and raising them as that. And you're going to have a great difficulty here competing against this from a practical sense. And I would say that it's not even necessarily guaranteed that just because you have a certain group of people that do have lots of children, that you're necessarily going to lead yourself to an unsustainable world, although there are not answers that you can derive from the Quran and the Sunnah that can help towards producing things which are sustainable. So we're commanded to look after the environment. So if there are things that are being shown that is damaging to the environment, then it is incumbent upon us to...
So if it was proved that having more children was damaging to the environment, you could say, well, actually, in order to protect the environment, which we commanded to...
How it diminishes?
So that
How?
If we're talking about the environment, like, it depends what we're classing as the environment.
What's the environment?
Well, the world and its the ecosystem in its natural state. Let's say an ecosystem in its natural state that we're a part of.
But this is another weird thing then. So how are we making, like, especially from an atheist perspective, how do you make this distinction from the natural state and us? Why are we outside of nature?
We're not outside of nature. We are animals.
So then we are part of that natural state.
But our actions are impinging and encroaching on all others.
So
and the amount of species that are going extinct, of all sorts.
But that's what an action is. An action is an impeachment of yourself upon something else, and anything that's alive that acts in any way whatsoever is acting upon its environment and impeaching upon it. The lion is doing that. I don't see how that is necessarily a bad thing. Because I'm trying to understand it from your world view.
We have imbalanced everything. So in nature and its natural
according
state,
to what? How do you know that?
I say so since we introduced animal agriculture, like it used to be like humans made up like a small percentage of the population, and wild animals made up like the rest. So now we take animals and our domesticated animals, we make up roughly like 97% of the biomass, and it's like the wild animals now make up 3%. So like with animal agriculture, we're decimating like basically wild animals' homes, so we can now grow animals to feed, with these sort of things. So that's a way, I suppose, of how you could measure our impact. And I would say, like, while we are obviously living in nature to a certain extent, humans have removed ourselves from nature. Like, we don't live in caves anymore. We don't,
But why would a human house not be considered nature?
I don't know. I suppose like you're just.
It seems like an arbitrary removal, because from either worldview. So like from my worldview, like humans are a part of nature, and we have been commanded, and we've got guidance and things like that. From your worldview, as far as I can tell, humans are still natural beings.
Yeah.
Do animals have religions that we don't know about and we're encroaching on those? For example, so we've been commanded. I mean, some people think that you've been commanded. I mean, how do we not know that a fox has a religion?
So we do believe that animals worship Allah as well.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be speaking for them. Really.
Well, Allah has told us. So.
Yeah. Sorry, bro. I'm wondering one other thing. He said that the children will damage the universe, right? The one upcoming children, the baby will.
It's getting very windy now.
Yeah. So how can you confirm me that the children, the new children, the upcoming children, they will not a good person like you who is not damaging the universe, who is not damaging the natural world. How you confirm that they will only damage, not doing anything good for the nature?
Because maybe the children that you gave birth to, let's say you took it upon yourself to have children, to adopt children, to whatever, to raise them, like that's going to have a greater impact on the world if you can
raise
convince
them by the right, what you believe to be
right, which is what we do. So we have children, as many as we can, and then we raise them as Muslims according to the ethos that we follow. And we hope that it's going to have this exponential impact as we have children, our children have children, they have children, and then they follow the ethos.
That's good.
We have the moral values as well. We will teach them.
Put this on yourself so we can pick up what you say.
You can do, but we're just wrapping up the conversation now, so you're going to get the right at the end.
Just do another 5 minutes, man. How's that? About another 5 minutes for street night.
Children that you have,
I don't know, like more I've got in me.
They're basically just sucking up carbon. Look at the little like the micro scooter that little boy's cutely riding around on. Look at the shirt on his back. Look at every single thing that goes into raising a person, especially by the standards that we've become accustomed to in modern society. So we know that just by existing, a new human is placing a great strain on the natural world as we're talking about.
But any life. So this is the thing. Like I get it, and I'll even concede to that as a proposition. Yes, like any living thing is going to put a strain upon its environment. But that's just the definition of life in general. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with life.
Of course, but it just comes back to whether or not you prioritise and you care for a future where our species is living in a balance with future of the planet.
If I follow you, then I will not get the next generation. So future of what?
As in future? Well, I mean,
there's not going to be no future without children.
I'm not picking up on this. I said maybe just think about like replacing ourselves. If you want to have children, you go, well, with a lady, you have two.
I literally want as many as I can have.
See, I think that.
I know you might not agree with that, but I do want.
I just think it's a selfish act.
Fair enough, but for me, it's like, why is that a bad thing?
Well, I suppose reiterate my point is, there are just so many children in this world that do not have a family. So I think we should be looking after those ones.
And say can I do that as well?
But then it's a great thing, I think, to take care of someone who is in existence. But to bring someone who doesn't exist into existence, I mean, there's almost like no.
I know it's hard to
No, I just want to say one thing, which is those kids that you have. I'm forgetting about whether or not I agree with zoos. Take them to the zoo, right? They'll see an animal, they'll see another creature. It's the most fascinating thing. It's the most beautiful thing.
But it's always the process of birth, bro.
Indeed.
The thing is, so when my daughter was growing in the stomach of my wife, that was an amazing experience, and you're not going to experience that with only adoption.
I'm not saying
the bond.
I'm not saying.
I know. But there is a bond that you develop with children that are from yourself that you can't develop with, and it's a shame, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
Now I get you, and I'm fine, and I think maybe we should all then adopt. And,
we're conflating a couple of things that are going on because I wasn't even thinking with it.
But my point is like, you say it's selfish. I say that it's not just, there is an element of selfishness. Because I, for one, would like to grow up in a big family underneath me, and I'd like to have lots of grandchildren that I can love and care for, and love each other. And but this isn't only me. This is my concern for the family that come from me, and developing an atmosphere where there can be a lot of love among each other and a lot of pleasure, not just for me, but for everyone that comes to me. And I try to teach them a moral system where they go out and they try to do good for the world, to give charity, to help people, the needy, the poor, so that they are reducing suffering in the world. So it's not simply, you can't reduce it to just me making a selfish act for wanting a big family that I would be an authority over, where I command them to do good and to forbid evil. How is that completely selfish? Because this is a huge thing.
Well, it's got a bit of selfishness in that we all know that not everybody can do that. Okay, so we should only really do things that we know that everyone can do fair.
No.
I can't have 10 if he can. If you have 10 kids and they all have 10 kids, you know, it's going to be.
If you don't want 10 kids, don't have 10 kids, bro. I'm not telling you have to, but I'm saying, for me, this is the best option. I think for me, for my religion, and for the world generally, because if I can increase the amount of Muslims in the world that do good, I think I'm having a positive impact.
Sorry for interrupting. After all, I'm wondering to both of you, right? We were not existing maybe 100 years ago. You, me, everyone in these four parts. We are not in zone maybe 50 or 60 years ago. So existing of ourselves in right now, is it evil or good or evil? Because before that we are not existing. So you are not supporting to come into new existence. So we were not existence in a certain time. So we came to existence. Is it good or bad? Because you are right now, you are a good person. You are taking care of the nature. So is it good or bad? Because you are not existing, right?
I mean, I would like to say my existence, is more positive than bad on
so
this planet.
How can you confirm that the news? Sorry.
I do I'm trying my hardest to create a sustainable world, to hold our politicians to account, to create this imbalance, and the way that we're currently living in our fossil fuel addicted society.
Can I stack one of these on you?
You can, yes, sure.
Thank you very much.
Like the way we're currently living at this moment in time is boiling the planet up. Every single year, our planet gets hotter and hotter. Like record break, Britain experienced a record-breaking temperature. Most of the times when temperatures break their records, it's usually like 0.1 of a degree. We smashed it by like 1.3 or something. Like our record, 1.3 degrees. So it's just unlivable. As this planet gets hotter and hotter, areas of the planet become unlivable. Like we can't grow crops there, we can't live there ourselves. But if we keep on creating new people, we're creating almost like this positive feedback loop where it accelerates the deterioration of our ecosystem, the way to even sustain life, because we can't grow enough crops to look after all of these people. So again, my argument would be:
are we not already growing enough food to feed everyone? It's just the way that we distribute it, is it?
Oh yeah, well, so we have enough land to feed every single person on a plant-based diet and reduce the land that we're using by 75%.
So the problem isn't that at all necessarily. The problem is just our crappy organisational skills. More than anything.
Yeah, basically, that's what I mean. It's a totally unsustainable system.
Because I would even because for us, for example, it wouldn't even necessarily be a case of promoting eating meat every day. Like the Sahaba, the Prophet Muhammad, he wasn't like someone who ate meat constantly in every single meal. He was a very humble person in terms of the amount that he consumed. He said, leave a third of your stomach for food, a third for water, and a third for air. And to eat little amounts, and he encouraged fasting a lot, things like that. So he was someone who would promote not eating much, not being gluttonous.
Very sorry.
And we were just finishing the conversation. So for me, I guess the problem for me just boils down mainly to meta-ethics. Like whenever I speak to, especially and again, I'm not trying to be derogatory in any way. but with atheism, I don't see how you can justify utilitarianism as something that people necessarily need to uphold. I see that if you do, that it has problems in terms of how to quantify the pleasure and pain thing. How do you really know that you have reduced pain? Because there's many things people don't take into consideration. Like we said, if you were to re-wild things that were farming, it's not that new life doesn't move in and occupy that space. And
I know, there's a friend of mine that talks about wild animal suffering, but nature is
it's a horrible place.
Exactly, it's a fight for survival. Evolution works in the sense of like the strongest, the animal that adapts the most. They come along.
And I'm not even for. There's so many microphones, bro. I'm running out of space.
You're so popular. Are you a YouTube star?
I wouldn't say I'm a YouTube star. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, so like I'm not even for animal enclosures necessarily at all. But it's interesting because their life expectancy is much higher, and if you get a scratch in the wild and it gets infected, you don't have a vet necessarily. No, exactly, if you've got toothache, you don't have a vet to sort of to sort that out. So wildlife goes through a lot of suffering, and removing places of agriculture and replacing it with the wild, I think there is a good argument to say you may even be increasing the amount of suffering. And I'm not even saying that doing that would be a bad thing. So, but then you have to leave utilitarianism behind, and you need to think of something else.
Well, you say, I understand what utilitarian means to a certain extent and everything. I suppose, I try not to use like any labels for myself in the slightest. I try to, look at things, not certain things potentially are black and white, but in general there are grey areas, aren't they? And
even the conversation with utilitarianism breaks down into subjects and things like that. But the main point is, if you're going to convince me of something, you need to give me good reasons to accept that proposition. Now, if your conclusion is that this is something we should not do, and I'm asking you what are the reasons for that, and if it boils down to because suffering is evil, and it's like, well, how is it that suffering is evil, or that increased amounts of pleasure is good?
How about if we continue, I'm not saying this is the only cause, there's a variety of causes, but it is a big contributing factor. How about if I said, if we continue with animal agriculture, we are going to create a planet that's unlivable? If we keep on burning down the Amazon rainforest, destroying our oceans, we are going to create an environment...
That's all fine, but that's not the same as the proposition that eating meat is wrong.
No, I know.
Comply! Resist! Defy! Do not comply!
I'm just, but for me there's a variety of reasons. The environmental reason is different to the ethics, and the ethics is different to the health.
They're all linked.
They are all linked. But I will just touch upon, I live like a vegan lifestyle for ethical reasons. I don't like the idea of killing something, and you referred to animals earlier as a him, didn't you? When you acknowledging they are a sentient being with their own subjective view of reality, they can feel pain and experience.
And the process of slaughter for us is we recognise that in the process. And we are thankful for Allah for giving us such things. The
thing is,
it's not like we don't disconnect ourselves from it. There's a relationship.
There's no trust. I do not think you're an evil person in the slightest.
It's fine if you do.
No. You are. But it's just that, we have options, don't we? We have a variety of choices. So if we can choose, why choose to cause more harm when we can choose to cause less harm? So that's like the sort of angle I would go at. And if eating plants causes less harm compared to eating animals, I would say we should go for that option.
And so I guess my response to that, just to sort of summarise, would be that I don't think you can say that you have caused less harm, because if life, falling back straight back to the beginning of the conversation, that if life is suffering, that allowing an animal to live is to allow it to suffer. And so essentially, by not eating the animal, technically you could be causing it to suffer even more, and which then undermines the reason for taking that as an argument to then not eat meat.
I suppose the argument would be then, not to bring. We've got the animals that are currently in existence. What we do with them, I don't know. I don't know what the best solution is. But a simple solution would just be not to create new ones, because when we create those new ones, we're creating a situation where we are putting them in creating suffering when there was no need to create that suffering in the first place.
How can you stop the natural reproduction of
No. So it wouldn't be a case of stopping natural reproduction, because that would occur, but it would be about, because at the moment we do a lot of artificial insemination, and so that increases the stock, but that's mainly tied to capitalism.
There's just really you saw Cowspiracy. I'd recommend, have you heard or seen this film called Milked? It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free. Milk. A couple of years, 1 or 2 years.
Probably not then.
So it talks about the dairy industry in New Zealand, and basically, Britain actually, with colonialism, introduced dairy into that, and dairy is just decimating New Zealand. It's created all their natural waters are now undrinkable, they're unswimmable. They used to have these glowing, glorious lands, and dairy is just skyrocketed.
So I could even get behind understanding why there may be problems with the dairy industry, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he just used to have a goat or a cow, and it would just graze nearby, and then they would go and they would milk it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a case of where they would make it pregnant so that it would produce milk and all of that.
And then the child's stolen, so they take away the child from the cow. There's videos you can see cows crying out, you can tell it's a distress sound, because the pitch of a cow's voice. There's variety. If you ever had a dog or a cat, there's a variety. Some are happy sounds and some are sad sounds. You can just learn that by observation, and you can tell when a cow's given birth. A lot of the time they'll just remove them because they don't want that calf taking the milk for us. And then you can hear the cow in distress. If they're a boy calf in the dairy industry, they're killed very early because they have no profitability. And if the female, they're basically kept in their closed environment until they're at an age where they can be artificially inseminated. They go through this process for about 7 years, and then they're sent to the slaughterhouse for cheap meat. The lifespan for a cow is about 20-25 years, and they just have 7 years of almost pure misery. And for cheese on pizza, sandwich fillings.
So I can get that maybe they don't like the experience of their calf being removed. But I wouldn't necessarily jump on this notion that they live constant suffering, because even human beings, I went through some crap when I was younger, and it caused me trauma, and I cried about it. Yeah. But I wouldn't say now that it's a big deal at all. I can get on a day-to-day basis just fine, and I don't see how a cow couldn't necessarily do that. Not to say that the milking industry is moral.
But I mean, if you're killed at a fraction of your lifespan, I mean, you wouldn't say it, would you?
Say again?
You wouldn't want to be killed at a fraction of your lifespan.
No, I wouldn't. But I don't see that as a necessary reason to infer onto cattle, because I don't consider cattle in the same moral sphere as the human being.
No, but you don't need to. All you need to know is, recognise that they have the right to exist free from exploitation and suffering as anyone else.
So I can maybe say that from an Islamic perspective, within the bounds of the law. Obviously, when it comes to sort of slaughtering for food and that, it can be a different matter. But I don't see how you can say that as an atheist, necessarily.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know. I just did though.
I know you just say it, but what's stopping me from just saying the opposite? So another atheist comes along and he just declares the complete opposite of your claim.
Yeah.
What do we do then? Because we're in a stalemate.
I don't know.
You need to sort of give good reasons to explain what it is that justifies your particular moral proposition over his.
Well, I don't. I feel like we're just repeating. Well, I'm repeating myself now anyway. But yeah, my position's coming from an empathetic and trying to be compassionate one. I suppose that's where it's coming from. I don't need personally. I suppose I'm not saying you need it or anyone else, but I don't need a religion for me to be able to determine what I believe is good from bad, right from wrong. Yeah, some people do.
Because where I grew up, like your level of compassion just isn't present.
No.
At all.
No.
Like I grew up in a council estate in North Manchester,
Yes.
and the majority of people have zero concern about any of these things.
Yeah. I know, because they've been dealt with bad hand. They're in an environment where it's like really rough, like you've got to do certain like horrible things probably to survive. And I hate that. I hate the fact that that exists. And I would love to try and create and move towards a world where people aren't struggling like that.
So this is the thing then. This is where the need for religion or some sort of overriding thing which guides people comes in.
Yeah.
And so you're suggesting that there should be something, but you just don't want it to be religion. But then it's still going to be falling under that category of being some sort of guidance for mankind.
Whatever, as long as it, whatever position, belief, philosophical position that you have doesn't cause harm to others, I'm cool with. Once your position, you have a belief where you feel you need to do this and it will cause harm to someone else, then I think it needs to be questioned.
So if you've got the Nazis, they're invading Europe, and the only way to deal with them is to fight them and to cause harm, that would, by what you just said there, be an evil thing.
Well, I think you're allowed to defend yourself. If someone's coming at you and it's going to kill you, and you know...
So say my friend here goes to attack this brother here.
It looks like he's going to.
And he defends himself, that's fine. Let's say he's incapable of defending himself.
Yeah.
Right? And he's not attacking me, but then I attack him.
Yeah.
I'm being an aggressor here.
But you're defending your friend.
Well, I'm aggressively... he's not attacking me, I'm not defending myself, which is what you said.
I'm saying, well, you're...
So I can proactively attack on the basis that it could potentially save someone else. So then it's not about not being aggressive. Aggression can be justified as well, even proactive aggression.
But how can you define who has the authority to define the harm? When you say the harm, so what is the basis of the definition? This is the harm and this is not harm. For example, a police, when someone is randomly shooting, killing the people, then he will recognize as terrorist. And when police is coming and maybe exchanging the fire, and this guy is gonna die, so police will not be terrorists, right? So both is harming their life, but one is terrorist and another one is not. So who will define this harm you say? Who will define this?
Yeah, because it's another huge conversation, because the lines end up being somewhat arbitrary depending upon who's drawing them. And but yeah, I'm a bit tired now. So
I am a bit tired.
I don't want to open up another 10-hour conversation.
No, it's been
really nice.
Tim.